Property. Okay. I'm sorry? So, no, this is from last year. Property. Okay. So this was a distribution from this semester. I apologize. I inadvertently sent you the wrong one. It's more or less in line with last semester, although the bottom half of the curve was a little bit heavy. There were a couple failures, a bunch of D's, and some A's. If I can diagnose globally what I think some of the issues were, first off, a lot of you get your interest questions correct, and that was that's 60% of the exam. I gave credit for a range of possible answers, and a lot of people simply missed those altogether. And I hope we can go over those during our individual sessions. Also, a lot of people didn't really incorporate a discussion of cases into their analyses. I mentioned this a number of times in class. We always study cases. We don't really say, there's no restatement of property, section 2207. It doesn't exist. So if you want to give a thorough answer, you need to work in your cases into the opinion. Also, in terms of timing, a lot of students did okay on the first one, not so okay on the last one, and they left the fifth one blank. Timing is an issue. Of all the problems for you to have, I can actually work with timing. I can't work with people who don't prepare. I can't work with people who don't care at all. If your problem's timing, that can be improved upon. Because there are certain techniques you can use that will help you. And I'll give you a very simple one now. All of my exams have the exact same format. There are 5 questions, and you have 90 minutes. That gives you an advantage. You know how much time you should be allocating for each question. That if you give, say, 30 minutes for reading the question, that means you have an hour left over for 5 questions. If you read 20 minutes for the question, that means you have an hour and 10 minutes for 5 questions, right? So you can divvy up your time. You need to practice, if you didn't finish on time, going through all the old exams. Even if you don't know everything and you finish competently, you're on track for probably a B, right? If you just finish the damn exam and give equal time to each question, you can probably pull a B. Most of the papers that were in the low end of the curve weren't people who didn't know the answers necessarily. They simply didn't finish, or they wrote maybe 1 or 2 sentences for question number 5, and it doesn't get you many points. So the major thing that I can work with you on this for the one-on-one meetings is timing, how to get yourself under control. One of the other aspects that you can work on is your outline. It's an unfortunate aspect that far too many students don't take their notes seriously halfway through the semester. There's nothing in my power to make you take notes halfway through the semester. And the reason why outlines are important is that they help you learn the material. As you know now, having your outline with you in the exam isn't very helpful, because when you're given a fact pattern, your outline doesn't really tell you what to do. You need to know what cases to check on your outline. So between now and the end of the semester, you will be having the responsibility to go over your outline and refine it. And the process of refining it helps you learn a bit more. On the last day of class, I scheduled a review. And what I'm going to do is go over the final exam from last year. And I'll go over it in painstaking details. So between now and the end of the semester, you should put together your outline and be ready to roll by the end of the semester. When the final exam review comes along, you should basically be in prime shape. Now, am I your first exam or your second exam? I don't remember. Which one do you have first? Okay, so I'm somewhere in the middle. To the extent you can, especially if you didn't do well in the midterm, front load your studying and work on property during the semester, because once you get to the reading days, I gotta do contracts first, then property falls behind. You want your outline to be in pretty good shape by the end of the semester. And again, I'm finishing a day early. I'm not giving you any assignments through the last day of class. That means no new readings. use that as an opportunity to improve your studies. I want you all to improve. I tell you, most students don't improve, and it's an unfortunate fact. The ones who do improve work with me, and I mean that sincerely. I've had people go from D's to B's, right? It happens. But you have to work for it. It doesn't come naturally. Again, the easiest thing I can work on is time. If timing is your issue, I can help you with that more than anything else. But you have to be willing to take lots of exams for 90 minutes at a time and see if you can actually finish. Okay? The questions on the exam. Again, I'm sorry, I sent you the wrong distribution. Here it is. This is the distro from last year, which is right within the curve. Yes, ma'am.
Do we need to bring anything that we can review?
Bring your exam.
Okay.
That'll help. Bring your outline. I'll probably ask to see it. If you say I don't have one, I'll say, well, that's duh. That explains why. Yeah, bring your exam. Bring your outline. If you have any questions, bring them in advance. This is your chance to work with this. It's an important aspect of this process that we can give you feedback early on in the semester, rather than simply giving you like when I went to law school, I didn't have a single midterm. I had one, and the students almost rebelled. But I didn't have, other than that one class, I didn't have any midterms in law school. So you get your final exams, like, okay, that's your first feedback. So South Texas professors were actually very conscious about giving you feedback earlier on the semester, and that's why we're doing this. Again, you will get your feedback from me. Rob.
I didn't see any feedback actions on the exam.
That's what you have to talk to me about. Yeah. Yeah. If I were to give you feedback in the exam with that context, it would make no sense. We'll walk through it. Anything else? Nothing else? Okay. I'll minimize this. All right. So we're talking today in our continuing discussion of marital property. So easy question starts you off. I think it'll put you in the right frame of mind. Okay. So your question is this: true or false? Property that is inherited by a husband during marriage is marital property. Take 30 seconds. All right. So, where am I? Who's next? Does no one remember? Long vacation? Oh, you're throwing her under the bus. Okay. Oh, she went. So is that Shana or Javier? Who's next? Okay. Okay, you're up. First off, before we get to this answer, what is marital property? What does that term mean? What does the term marital property mean?
Something between two couples.
Okay.
Land.
Is everything that's acquired during marriage considered marital property?
Yes.
No. And is everything acquired during marriage considered marital property?
No, isn't the case.
Why?
Degree isn't.
Why? Well, we'll get to the degree in a minute, but as a general matter, putting aside the degree, why is some property acquired during marriage not marital property?
Marital property can be.
Right? It's something of a trick question, right? When you say marital property, you might think, well, that means all property acquired during the marriage. That is not the case. It's not the case in common law property states like New York, and it's not the case in community property states like in Texas. The law defines that only certain types of property acquired during marriage is marital. Okay? Why does this matter, right, Oscar? at the time of divorce, which is our topic for today, right? At the time of divorce, what is divided up? What type of property is divided up?
Property that, such as land or such?
When a couple gets divorced, what is the category of property that's divided? What do you call that category of property?
By category, you mean?
What's the category of property that gets divvied up at divorce? What do we call that category of property?
Marital?
Yes, that's right. Marital property is the property that gets divvied up at a divorce, right? If something is considered marital property, then a court can divide it up during a divorce proceeding. If it's not considered marital property, the court can't divide it up. So Anne mentioned the degree case. We'll get there in a bit. So certain types of property are considered marital, and other types of property are not considered marital. So Marcos, let me bring you to our question for today. Is property that's inherited by a husband or wife, would go either way, during the marriage, marital property? Is that true or false?
False.
Why do you say false?
Well, because the book said, well, the book lists exceptions, and property inherited is an exception on the list. And it's not something that was brought into the marriage when they were married. The husband inherited it.
Ah. So is inherited property considered marital?
No.
Okay, he's right. Okay, so the answer here is false. Okay, so you guys stop people changing their answers frantically. Okay, no, it's closer than I thought, right? That's wrong. Okay, so A is wrong. The correct answer is false. But why is it false? The law wants to create certain kinds of incentives, right? That if a husband and wife are living together and contributing to a similar goal, that should be something that's protected in the event of a divorce. So I'll give you an easy example, right? The classic argument is, let's say you have one spouse stays at home and takes care of the children, and the other spouse goes to work and makes a living, right? Is the service provided by the first spouse any less valuable, taking care of children? No. But does she have any dollars and cents to show for raising children? No. Okay. Is the second spouse working? He's making actual dollars and cents. So the idea is, if property is brought into the marriage, it should be shared. And in the event of a dissolution, that is, in the event of divorce, courts can then divvy it up. Yeah, read.
Is that the majority view? Because it does say some states do include inheritances or something.
Yeah.
Is there a-
Yeah, the majority view is that inheritances are not included. The majority views inheritances are not included in marital property. But let me give you the reason why. And again, there's always differing rules. But the reason why is this, right? Is that Andrew? Yeah, Andrew. Right? Let's say that, you're married, and, during your marriage you inherit money from your great-great uncle who died, and your wife never met this person, and you just inherit this, this land or whatever. Did your marriage play any role in the inheritance? Is there anything that the husband or wife did to result in that money being inherited? Aha. So the thinking here is this. Inheritances are in no way attributable to the marriage. Everyone understand this, right? Nothing in the marriage resulted in Uncle Joe dying and giving you all this money when he died. Okay? Jolene, by a similar extension, what about property acquired before a marriage? Does that become marital property?
Oh, it was a question I was going to ask.
Oh,
because
good.
Just now you said,
Whoa.
You just said if you brought property into the marriage, then it would be divvied up at divorce.
Well, no, I didn't say that.
You did not.
No, I did not say
Okay,
that.
then my answer is no. That property, if you came into the marriage.
So let's say, let's say it like this, right? Let's say you have a house and you're living in it, right? And you own it free and clear. And then you get married and your spouse moves in with you. Is that house now marital property?
No.
Okay, let me change the hypo. Let's say you were paying off the mortgage and you had it half paid off. And then you get married and your spouse moves in. And then you finish paying it off after the marriage. Is it marital property now?
Part of it.
Gets complicated. So, what I'm trying, you'll do this in the next class. It's a specific rule about making payments. But the short answer is, whether or not something's considered marital property is a very important decision. If it is marital property, the court can chop it up in half. If it's not marital property, it belongs to the spouse that brought it in. So let's say, easier example, right? Person gets married, he has jewelry, right? He has gifts, he has various stocks. So long as that stuff is not mingled, right, mixed, it can generally remain as a separate piece of property. But if there's commingling involved, if you joint bank accounts and the like, you can make it marital property. You also have what's called a prenuptial agreement or a marital property agreement. You sure have heard of these, right? The idea of a prenup is you say in advance, here's how we're going to allocate our money. What's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, or whatever happens to be. Parties can always agree by contract to specify what is and is not marital property. Let's say there's an expensive home in the family. It says, well, this home is very valuable. I don't want this marital property. You can sign that. Now, often the issue is with these prenups, were they written with valid consent, right? Was the other party given all the information necessary to sign this, or was there something withheld? Fraudulent disclosures, right? Fraudulent withholding information. So these are often litigated issues. So having a prenup doesn't mean you're out of the woods. Very often these things are litigated. People nodding their heads, that's right. But in theory, the idea is you specify what is and is not divorce. I'm sorry, what is and is not marital property at the time of divorce. I want to repeat a point I made last week. During the marriage, it's largely irrelevant what is marital and what is not marital property. It doesn't really matter because courts aren't dividing up assets during the marriage. It only plays a factor upon divorce and also upon death, but death is actually a little bit easier. With divorce, you're fighting over what's what. Yeah, Brittany?
The reasoning you gave about why one theory or one definition of marital property is preferred over the other, and that was about that the inheritance, the marriage had nothing to do with it, essentially, and it didn't play a role.
Right.
In the other definition, like the book says, it says that it only includes property acquired from earnings of either spouse during marriage. So what you acquired or what you earned, whatever have you. That same theory or that same reasoning applies to that. The marriage doesn't have an implication on what you earn and how you're able to spend.
Oh, what a good question though. So let me answer Brittany's question, right? Her question is this. When you have a job, right, and you earn money with that job, Brittany says the marriage doesn't contribute to those earnings? Is that what your position is?
I'm saying the theory or the reasoning that's given on why the marriage wouldn't play a role on whether or not that person gets the inheritance.
Okay.
Could be applied. I mean, I don't understand how it would relate to the same of earnings.
All right, Miranda, let me try this one, Miranda, okay? When, there's a married couple, and then one gets up in the morning and says, you know what, I really don't want to go to work today, I hate my job. He says, you better get your butt out of bed and go to work, make a living. And he goes to work and he makes a living. Did the marriage play a role in that earning?
Well, the earnings support the marriage.
No, before.
Oh, okay.
Did the actual marriage play a role in those earnings? Or say one of the spouses gets unemployed, the other one says, you get to the unemployed ad, you're the classified ads, you find a job.
Well, kind of, yes.
Okay, kind of is good enough, right? The theory, and we can argue if this is true in practice, is that when you have a married couple, they're supporting each other. And the fact that one has a job, it's only with the blessing and support of the other one, right? So in fact, you see what I'm saying, right? What you say? What'd you say?
I said, oh, wow.
Not realistic, huh? Okay, fair.
I think that that's more of a question of the dynamic of that relationship.
Sure.
I know that that's
Sure. No, sure. Brittany's giving reality. She's giving us reality. I'm going to now give you what the theory is behind it. It's that when there's a husband and wife, or husband, whatever happens to be nowadays, you have a presumption that to the extent that one of them's employed and gainfully employed, it's because of the other one's support and love. You get rolling your eyes, right? And care. Yeah. Your eyes are almost facing Casey at this point. Yeah.
I'm not trying to be, against that concept. That's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to square the reasoning.
Right. Well, let me put it differently, right? Let me put this a different way. If my uncle dies, right, he's on my bloodline. Is he going to be my wife's bloodline? So that's even another reason why, right? Usually inheritances, unless I guess there's incestuous, right? Usually with inheritances, it's only on one bloodline. So it's even more separate from the marriage. At least with a job, that's why I give the example to Miranda. You wake up in the morning, get your butt out of bed, and go to work, put your clothes on, right? Right? At least there's some indication that the husband and wife are helping each other. Think of the other case. We did this last week, right? Where the wife took care of the husband in exchange for some property. And then the husband didn't give her the property upon his death. Right? And the court said, no. There's this obligation that the husband and wife have a duty to each other. Right? The consequence of that obligation is joint earnings are considered marital. Right? That's the payoff for having this love and support, that you do accumulate this marital property. If everything was considered separate, you wouldn't get it. Now, I think Brittanys, again, give me her rolling eyes, but she's right. This is an antiquated view of reality. I think probably everyone would more or less agree with this position. It doesn't reflect reality, but that's how the courts, I think, interpret this.
So the majority rule would be earnings only, not gifts and not inherited.
Yeah, usually inheritances are not going to be considered marital property. Yeah.
Gifts?
Gifts are trickier. I said inheritances. We'll leave it gifts for now. We'll leave inheritances, yeah. Yeah, I didn't say gifts. Inheritances, specifically because inheritances are usually not in any way connected with your spouse. It's an independent family bloodline. All right, with me. Yeah. Mike and Julian?
Is that only for intestate, or is that...
Well, we're talking about divorce here, not death, right? Okay. We're talking about divorce here.
Or inheritance from an intestate death versus if it's willed?
I don't know. Why would it make a difference?
Perhaps a willed, this willed property would be for the family.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Towards the family.
Yeah, I mean, well, in that case, if, let's say, a woman dies and leaves her son-in-law and her daughter property jointly, that's permissible, and then it's definitely marital property. But I'm talking about only for the son, not the in-law. And Julian?
So when the property is owned prior to the marriage, that is not marital property, correct?
Say it one more time. I think you're right. Just say it one more time.
When the property is owned outright to the marriage,
yes, ma'am.
That is not marital property.
Yes, ma'am. That's right.
Now, the property is owned only partially. You only have paid. I want to make sure I was right.
We're going to do that next week. Just ask me next class. There are various rules about property that's partially paid off and gets complicated. We'll do that next class, I promise. Yeah, Andrew?
All right, so I know this may be going into like special circumstances and stuff
Always.
like that. But so we're saying that inheritance is not marital property, and that the marriage doesn't really affect it. I guess I'll just use this is my personal case. My grandfather has a trust set up for us when he died. Part of the conditions of being able to pull from the trust is that we be married.
Oh, wow. Is it No, Mike, one at a time. Is that be married by a certain age, or what?
So we had to be married for at least 5 years and can never have been divorced. He was a very deep Southern Baptist man. So.
Wow. Well, I don't see a ring on that finger.
No, but so in that case, the marriage.
But that's his condition, though, right? So you're asking me, you're asking me, would that trust money then be marital property?
Yeah.
But if you get divorced, you lose it.
Yeah. Well,
divorced after 5 years, right? Okay, then. Kendra, I thought this is your example with your mom was that. This is even worse.
She's after her parents. He's after his wife.
Wow. So let me understand your question. Your question is the payment of from your grandfather's trust to you considered marital property because it was contingent upon you being married?
Yeah.
I think you need to talk to a lawyer. I think you can sign a prenup, my friend.
I've been thinking about this whole thing. Like,
I know you have.
This whole class, like, how is this? Like, what type of?
That's a middle road issue. I don't know the answer. That's, and I suspect your spouse might have a different opinion from you.
I mean,
yeah, you need a lawyer on this one, my friend.
I would think it is after hearing this.
It might be. And if you find a lawyer, tell me what he said, because I'm not giving you that advice. I don't know. No. But okay, Marco said don't tell you the money. That's called fraud. Right? And in fact, if you try to sign a prenuptial agreement and you fail to disclose your assets, it can be nullified retroactively on failure to inform the other spouse. So I mean, look, I mean, honesty is often the best policy, I think, especially here. But yeah, talk to a lawyer, my friend. But everyone understand what he's saying, right? It's a very specific issue. Interesting to. But they have these. I mean, I've read about one, even more precise, where, happy Passover, everyone, a Jewish grandfather says, money goes to the kid if he marries a Jewish girl. Even more precise, is that against public policy? And courts actually grappled with, can you exclude a person from a trust because she married a non-Jew? It's actually, this is litigated. There's a New Jersey case in this. I can't remember how it turned out. Google it if you want, but there was a case from this in New Jersey a couple of years ago.
They held that it
Was it valid? Okay, she's taking wills and trusts, so she knows exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, but it was a seriously litigated issue. All right, what else? Morbid killing mothers, divorcing future wives to get trust money. And also you're in Texas, which makes it even more complicated with community property. I'm going to leave it there. Yeah, Madison, and then Jordan.
I don't really know if this is applicable because it's not necessarily property, but you can have separate bank accounts, and could you put money in it without the spouse knowing? Would that be fraud?
Well. All right. So let me answer. Oh God, this is the how do I screw over my spouse class, right? Look, you're all lawyers. You're all smart. In a common law property state that's generally permissible, earnings can be considered separate. In Texas, where you all live, it's a lot harder because all earnings, regardless of what bank account they put in, are considered community. So you have to basically have a prenuptial agreement with very precise terms to separate it, and you can't have commingling. It gets very complicated. People taking notes, I can see. Jordan, your hand was up?
So if you come into a marriage with a house that you own outright, but then you get married, but then you use community property money or whatever to pay for like property taxes, where your wife takes care of the house, is there an argument that she not?
It varies by state. We'll do that next class.
Okay.
But it gets really complicated. I think I saw another hand. Mike, and then Kendra.
In the case of somebody that owns a business, comes into a marriage.
Oh, God. Not that you're asking out of experience, right?
A self-employed person has a small business, and they have the prenup set up to isolate their earnings.
Isolate. Yeah.
Or shield, or whatever you hide. Is any sort of benefit given to the family from the business at that point going into the land of commingling?
So it varies a lot whether you're in a community property state or common law property state. If you notice, I keep saying that. The rules can be very different. But as a general matter, in a community property state like Texas, if there's any commingling, it becomes marital property. You really have to go out of your way in Texas to keep property separate. It's really tough. There are a lot of things you have to do precisely, and if you slip up, you can... And again, why does this matter, right? Usually in a divorce, there's a spouse with more money and a spouse with less money. Maybe they're equally, they don't care. But the spouse with more money is like, no, that's not marital property, right? And the spouse with less money is like, oh, it's all marital property. And so the fight is, what is marital property? Because then you know what to chop in half, right? Because unless you know what your pie is, you can't slice it in half. But it's not only slicing in half, something that's equitable more or less, but it's about half. Kendra.
So I'm guessing then that includes like bonuses and stuff too.
Payments, yeah. You thinking of law firm bonuses and clerkship bonuses?
Just like bonuses and
God, this is the love class, right? Yeah, I've had students before who basically their spouses are putting them through law school, and there's always a very uncomfortable class for them. It happens every year. Yeah. This is uncomfortable giggling. Not me. Yeah, whatever. So in law school, there are quite a number of people in law school who go through divorces. You'll see this in your 3 years. And I had several people I knew who put their spouse through law school, and then they got divorced shortly thereafter. And you don't get the tuition back. You don't get the payment. No, you don't get. It's not marital property. The case from the Colorado case, right? All right. Questions at this so far? But glad we got all this love out of the way from Jonathan. I should discuss on Valentine's Day. That'd be really special. So the entire notion of divorce is actually a fairly common idea. At common law, divorce was only permitted in cases of abuse or neglect or adultery. Adultery was almost always a ground for divorce. But it was generally the man who would have to petition for it. That is, the woman was not able to petition for the divorce. Today, we have divorce in all 50 states, but it varies. Believe it or not, the idea of divorce has been legalized fairly recently. Like Italy, for example, divorce was legalized in 1970. Portugal, 1975. Spain, 1981. Ireland, 1996. And Malta, where you may go for your summer abroad program, is 2011. So divorce is a fairly, we think of it as very commonplace, but it didn't exist in the same fashion as it did today. There are a couple kinds of divorce regimes in the United States. The easiest one was called a no-fault divorce. And what no-fault divorce means is you don't have to have a reason. You don't have to cite adultery. You don't have to cite infidelity. You don't have to cite abuse, neglect, whatever else. So this is, you always see in California, they separate it for irreconcilable differences. Or even know what the hell does that mean? It means they don't have a reason they want to make public, right? And they don't need a reason, because under a no-fault regime, you don't have to explain to the court why you have it. Some states have what's called a modified no-fault regime, which is like Virginia, where I went to law school. And under a modified no-fault regime, you can get you can get divorced without a reason, but you have to wait a little bit. So like in Virginia, if there's allegations of abuse or adultery, some sort of fault, right, you can get divorced right away. But if it's you don't want to be together anymore, you have to wait 6 months or a year. And the thinking is, well, if we make them wait a year till they get divorced, they'll reconcile. They'll come back together. They'll see how much they love each other. They'll realize their grandpa might disinherit them, right? They'll find a reason to stay together. Is your grandpa passed away?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you won't be disappointed then.
Well, maybe.
Or maybe you will, I don't know.
It's still written in the trust, I'd lose it.
How many siblings do you have?
I have 4 siblings.
And are they all married yet?
They're all older than me, and all 3 have been disqualified.
No, really?
Wow.
Older.
So you get everything?
Are you the sole survivor then of the trust?
No, I have my granddad had 5 kids too, so they're...
How many kids total? Grandkids?
Not counting disqualifications, it's 20.
Oh my God, how many knocked out so far?
So far, it's like, I think it's like 14 now.
I've been knocked out?
No, that are left.
Well, okay. Historically, though, at common law, okay, calm down, everyone. I know this is exciting stuff, right? At common law, at a divorce, the woman was usually screwed. The reason why is the common law said whoever held title to the property at divorce kept it. And as you could imagine, at the time of common law, the man would hold title to all the property. So basically, he didn't get much. The only thing a woman would get is if there was a tenancy by the entirety. At a divorce, she'd then be reduced to a joint tenancy. She'd have something for her protection. Right? That's why the tenancy by the entirety was so important. It would ensure the woman had something. But this more or less changed in the 1970s with the advent of California and no-fault divorce. Texas has what's called a modified no-fault divorce. You have to wait 90 days for a full divorce. So you have to wait a little bit. Maybe you reconcile, maybe you don't. In California, you can get divorced in 5 minutes. It's pretty. If it's uncontested, if it's contested, that goes on for a while. Now, at common law, property was often divided in half, right? It was called equal distribution. Today, it's something different. It's called equitable distribution. Josh, what's the difference between equal distribution and equitable distribution, right? What's the difference? Well, equal suggests equal, half, 50-50. Equitable suggests fairness, right? You divide it up according to the court's discretion. And I mean this when I say discretion. These sorts of equitable distributions are not really subject to reversal and appeal, right? If you notice from the Colorado case, say, well, we don't really judge whether the discretion was appropriate. We judge questions of law. So as a matter of course, whatever sort of distribution the trial court gives you, that's probably what you're going to be wind up with. Okay? And again, you only distribute equitably what is marital property. If something is not marital property, you do not chop it up. Okay, everyone with me? Yeah.
You said it from the equitable
or the one that promotes fairness?
Yes. So it's possible that one spouse might need the money more than the other spouse,
Okay.
right? Whereas in the equal distribution, it's 50-50 no matter what.
Could it also be determined on, based on why they're getting divorced, like if there was infidelity on one side?
Yeah, yeah. You know, if there's a fault, for example, infidelity, that can often impact how the assets are distributed. Yeah. Yeah, Ashton.
That was my question.
Yeah. No, if there's allegations of infidelity, that's usually a reason why you should probably settle and reach an agreement out of court. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, 'cause I saw somewhere where it was like, because they had a prenuptial agreement, however, in that prenuptial, it said that if there was infidelity, then the inheritance that spouse would get would be split in half.
Oh, punishment, right?
So they can do that.
Well, look, if you want to do a prenup in advance, you can do whatever terms you want. But the question is, in the absence of a prenup, say you don't have any agreement, you get divorced, an adultery will usually help the non-cheating spouse in terms of getting more money.
And they can incorporate, without the prenup, they can incorporate the court can decide to incorporate the inheritance.
Well, inheritance is a matter of a will, so I don't think the courts can decide what happens after a person dies. But the question is, what marital property still in existence at death, right? At death, you only divide up property you have. If you don't have property, it doesn't get divided up. If the divorce results in a distribution and it says we're taking this house and giving it to the wife, then it can't be inherited by anyone else, right? It doesn't modify the will, but it takes out property from the will, so there's nothing to give away. Everyone understand that point? It raises a good question. When you die, if you don't have the property anymore, guess what? Your heirs have luck, right? If you die and you lost that property because of a divorce decree, it's not yours anymore to give away. So even if a will saying, I am leaving this house, leaving Blackacre to my grandson, look, if you lost in a divorce, it's not yours to give anymore. You only can give property to death that you still have.
So on the flip side, if your spouse dies and they did have the inheritance, that automatically becomes yours, right? It doesn't go back.
Are you saying in the event of a divorce? I'm not sure I understand your question. Well, as a general matter, if your spouse dies without a will, the wife gets a cut of it, half or a third, depending on how the law works.
But if you're like in the middle, you said you have to wait 90 days in some states.
This is about for divorce, right? So it says if you file for divorce, you have to wait 3 months until you can actually petition for it. It's basically what you ask the court for it, and you have to wait 3 months before you can actually go ahead with the process. That's for uncontested divorces, right? If the divorce is contested, it can drag on for a long
So if
time.
one of you dies though in the midst of
Oh, I see what your question is. So Ashton asked,
how does that work?
if someone dies during the 90-day window, you're not divorced yet. You're still married, right? I mean, it sounds like a good murder mystery, right? The wife kills the husband during the 90 days to get his money. I mean, I suppose that's possible. But you're still married. You're still married.
And so,
One at a time. Raise your hand. Good.
so it goes to the heirs, and it will still go to the heirs.
As if there was no divorce. Right? If they're not divorced, until a final decree of divorce, they're still married. And you can imagine the judge says, I now pronounce my final decree. He's like, never mind, just kidding, we love each other, right? And they go hug and kiss. Divorce is off. You can always reconcile. That's why the California regime is so ambitious. It can happen right away. Now, I don't know how many people reconcile in 90 days or 6 months here. Maybe they don't. I don't know. Kendra.
So if somebody dies in the 90 days, but they figure out that like the wife did kill the husband,
Oh, good fault. Yeah.
does all this stuff go to like their heirs?
Well, there's a Slayer statute. I'm sure you're aware of that, where if you kill someone, you can't profit from the crime. Right.
So who does it go to?
Not you. Yeah, Marcos. Whatever you're thinking, stop thinking it.
So just to make sure everything's right in my head, no, adultery isn't the same thing as in, no, it is?
No, adultery and infidelity, I think they're the same thing. I
They're the
mean,
same thing.
I don't.
What does that mean again?
Cheating.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like when you had like multiple women or something.
No, that's polygamy.
Okay.
That's okay. Well, actually, so polygamy would be a ground for divorce. No, if you ask someone, will you marry me, and you don't disclose the person was previously married, that's a ground for divorce. Because it's polygamy. Oh, God, yeah.
But if it's polygamy and they get divorced, does the court only recognize the first wife, so the other ones are screwed?
The first wives club, right? Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, it's the first marriage, I think, would be valid, yeah.
It's against the law.
Oh God. Just please one at a time. One at a time. I can't do this, right? Yeah, Matt.
What kind of, I don't want to go too far down rabbit hole. I'm just kind of curious, though, what kind of property rights would someone be able to have if they thought that they were a sister walk under a wall? So if you know what I'm talking about, like what rights do they have if they none?
Polygamy has been outlawed in our civilization for a very long time. So one of these conditions on which Utah was admitted to the Union was to prohibit polygamy. That was actually the Utah Constitution that required to prohibit polygamy. So the answer is none.
But okay, so they don't actually legally have polygamy, but they practice polygamy, and they call it something else. The guy would have like one wife, but he has
The one official wife and the sister wives.
And then they all have
They have no protection. They're actually, literally speaking, but I think they're in a very rough spot.
I don't know if there's like some other contract.
I mean, they're roommates, right? I mean, they can have a roommate agreement. They don't have to have a marital agreement. But I think in Utah, it's a crime to hold yourself out as married, polygamous. Got anything else? This was an easy class. I was wrong. Okay. If only the rule against perpetuity was this much fun. All right, let's move on. So, the first case, the only case. Yeah, I'm actually annoyed. You're not annoyed. They shortened this chapter. They took out a case I really liked. It was a good case. And the facts are like this. You have this very famous opera singer, Frederica von Stade. And her husband was also an opera singer, but he quit his job and spent 20 years as her voice coach and helped promote his career. Okay. Then they got divorced. And he tried to recover as marital property his contributions to her career. And the court basically said, no, you can't do it. So but that was a good case. They took out of your book. Whatever. We have this case off. This case is good. So, who am I up to? Jordan, Megan, Jordan, you next? Yeah.
I think so.
No. No, so Jordan. Okay, good. Megan, you're next. Don't worry. So, give me the facts and Graham.
Graham, so basically, a couple was married for 6 years. During that time, the wife was an airline pilot, and she contributed 70% to the household income, while her husband got his bachelor's degree and a master's degree in business. And then upon divorce, when she sued for or sought divorce, she didn't seek alimony.
Okay.
But the district court decided to determine that his degrees were property of the marital property, so they divided it against the future earnings that his degree would bring in.
Okay, very good. So first off, Megan, what is alimony? It's mentioned briefly in the case, but what does this phrase alimony mean?
It's money that's paid to help support the spouse who doesn't have as much money.
Okay.
Money.
How long does that alimony last for?
A few years.
A few years. So you're correct as a matter of as a matter of current law. But at common law, alimony was deemed to be forever. The presumption was, and it was always the woman at this point, the wife was uneducated, unable to work, and she needed to basically be cared for by the husband forever. Because she didn't get any property distribution, she would get some sort of monthly payment. This is also where child support comes from as well. But we don't call it alimony anymore. It's that we just don't use that word. The word that's used now is spousal support. Is the word you'll see, spousal support. Spousal support is different in a few different ways, right? First off, it's not forever. The purpose of spousal support is to get the spouse, who's less income, back on his or her own feet, and to get a career going. So there's some sort of duration of time, whatever it is, years, however it is. Also, it's not meant to sustain them, right? It's not meant to be saying, well, you're going to live off your alimony for life. It's designed to let them go to school, develop a career, get what they need to do. Courts can adjust orders of spousal support if they find it's no longer necessary. This is similar to child support. They can adjust it. So say if one parent has custody of the kids, and this parent gets a better job, they can reduce the child support order, they can reduce the spousal support order. These things are variable. And it depends in large measure on the specific facts of the circumstances, right? If both spouses have college degrees and they earn a lot, the reward might be less. If one spouse never went to school, doesn't have jobs, the reward might be more. Everyone with me? So, Neiman, in this case, why didn't Mrs. Graham petition for an alimony award? It's mentioned at the very end. The dissent mentions it. Why didn't she petition for any alimony?
She wasn't qualified.
She was uneligible. Why was she uneligible? Who in Colorado under the law, who was able to seek alimony?
The Colorado law is for the man.
Well, not just for the man. What kind of divorcing spouses were able to seek spousal support in Colorado? What about Mrs. Graham made her ineligible for the money? No, don't help him. Celeste, you can just answer it.
Oh, because she worked,
She
was
worked.
able to support herself.
Yeah. So under Colorado law, if the spouse who's divorced can support himself or herself, they were not eligible for alimony. So the majority opinion, which is a little bit circular as well, even though she doesn't get the degree, she gets alimony. Well, she not quite, because she worked for herself. I don't know if that's still the regime. But as it turns out, under the law at the time, the only way that Miss Graham can get something was through division of marital property. So the question here is, what is the marital property of the couple? At the time they were divorced, they didn't really have much, right? At the time they divorced, they didn't have much. They didn't own a home, right? They didn't have many assets. The facts of this are actually fairly common. She supported him through his various years of schooling, and he got a job, and shortly thereafter he got divorced. This is going to be like you after the 5-year mark, right?
No, you lose access to it once you get divorced.
Oh, you lose everything?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
You no longer draw.
So you have to, the second you get divorced, you can't draw. How much is the annual draw?
Yeah. And it's also like felonies can disqualify you.
Holy crap.
All that type of stuff.
Andrew.
If you get divorced, does that mean you have to pay back everything you took out?
Not at that point.
Now, what if your wife kills you? Does she get the money?
I don't know.
You and Kendra, no, just leave it there. So, at the time of this divorce, there just wasn't marital property, right? The only asset that was of any worth was the degree. Now, let's just think about this for a minute, right? What is a degree? Well, God willing, you all graduate here in a couple of years, and you'll hang on your wall a frame. And the frame will say, Josh Blackman, graduate of College of Law, gets all the rights and whatever else. Brittany, what's the value of that actual piece of paper hanging on your wall? Is it worth anything?
As a personal worth, what your pride in it.
Could you sell it?
No.
Actually, you can. So if you go to Craigslist, you can actually buy, people's degrees they don't want anymore and hang on your wall. And I guess you could forge it today. But back in the day, you could actually, the phrase diploma mill, you've heard of this? It used to be you actually print diplomas. You actually buy a diploma on Craigslist. But Brittany, an actual diploma, can you buy one?
No.
Okay. Can you transfer, Brittany, a diploma from A to B?
No.
Okay. So if I gave you my diploma, would it be any value to you?
No, great. That saved me money.
No, it saved you money, but it wouldn't be doing you good, right? It would do you no good. So a diploma by itself, everyone I think would agree, is not property, right? Celeste, what exactly was it that Ms. Graham was claiming? It wasn't the diploma itself she wanted to divide up. What was she actually asserting she wanted to divide up?
It was the future profit he was going to make out of having that higher degree.
Very good. She wanted a cut of his increase in earnings because of having that degree. And you study this in other classes, right? So let's say you commit a tort, right, and you kill a person. And his wife then sues you for damages. She can sue you for future lost earnings, right? Remember this? Right? So if, say, the husband was a primary caregiver and you kill him, she can then sue you for whatever earnings he would have had over his life. And they have experts come and say, well, he's, say, 35 years old now, and based on his education, this is his anticipated future income, and if he worked till he was 70 years old, here's how much he would make, and we'll discount it for present-day values. They can calculate this. It's an actual science of how much a person is likely to make. It's not precise, but they come up with an estimate. So you're familiar with this concept of a spouse. But now here's the irony, right? If, Mr. Graham was murdered, she would have no problem going after the murderer for these damages. But the fact is he's not dead, guy's just divorced. And can they go after the husband for the future earnings? So Rebecca, what does the court hold here?
No.
They cannot. Why?
Well, it talks about just looking at the different concepts of property, and that looking at this degree and this concept, this has none of the attributes of property in the usual sense of the term.
Okay, so give me a little bit more. Why does this have none of the normal attributes of property?
It does not have an exchange value or any objective transferable value on an open market. It is personal to the holder. It terminates on the death of the holder. It is not inheritable. It cannot be assigned, sold, transferred, conveyed, or pledged. And it keeps going.
Well, let's say go to Mike. Mike, we did a case about this, right? What cases remind you of that? You can have it, but you can't really transfer it. Does this ring a bell of a case we studied early on this semester?
The house, the life estate.
Not the house. You know what case I'm thinking of, Mariah? What case I'm thinking of? That you can have property, you can't sell it. Good. What else am I thinking of? No, not Native Americans. Who's that? Organs, right? Moore versus Board of Regents, right? You can have an organ, but you can't sell it. You can perhaps donate it, but you can't sell it. This is like the bundle of sticks, right? It's like the bundle of sticks. A diploma is only good in the hands of the earner, right? Only the person who earns it. So the court says this is not marital property under the statute. Now, wait a minute. I'll go back to you, Mariah. Brittany and I had this conversation before, right? Didn't I tell you that one of the theories behind marital property is, the spouse encouraged the husband to go to work, right? And the spouse enabled the husband to get this. Well, why doesn't that fit in here? Why is this not, the wife was literally working full time as a flight attendant so the husband can go get a degree. If she hadn't pulled this job, he could have gotten a degree. Why is this not marital property under that theory?
Because it's something that's expected under the duty of marriage.
I think that's a good answer, right? She says it's expected under the duty of marriage that one spouse will support the other, and that there's no additional benefit to providing this care. So what if the wife was, a little bit more selfish? Said, what, screw this. I'm not working to put you through school. Pay your own damn way. Okay, well, then maybe they get divorced, maybe not. But she chose to do this, perhaps with the understanding that her loving husband would then care for her. Although I did the math on this. She was making about $1,000 a month. In present day value, it's about $50,000 a year as a flight attendant. She worked for Frontier Airlines, which is not the current Frontier Airlines, but it was an airline based in Denver back in the day. So the majority opinion effectively says that it's not marital property. Very briefly, I want to explain the district court's math was very curious in this case, right? How did the trial court come up with his award? It's very strange, right? So the expert says the future value of an MBA, a business degree, is $83,000. And the wife gets 40% of that. Had they come up with 40%, this is very bizarre math, right? Well, look at it this way. The husband studied 40 hours a week and worked 20 hours a week. So the husband was working 60 hours a week. The wife worked 40 hours a week. So there's a total of 100 hours a week being worked. And 40% of that was the wife. Therefore, she gets 40% of 83. That's illiterate. I don't know how, Julian, you're nodding your head. Is that completely mathematically illiterate?
Yeah, that's very strange because you can't equate the work that he did at school with the work she did to earn money.
It's completely incoherent.
Right. So if you follow that same logic, if a wife who is a stay-at-home mom, she works 100% of the time.
It gets $0.
No, the other way. If you count that as a job,
Oh.
then she's working 100% of the time.
Oh, I see. 24/7. I see your point.
Exactly.
So she gets even more.
She gets everything, and he gets nothing. That doesn't make sense.
Well, in any event, the trial court used bizarre math. So I think the court was going to reverse anyway, and maybe this was an easier ground to reverse. Remember I said earlier that courts don't like second guessing their equity, their equitable distribution. This would be a case where I think it would be you basically, like I don't know who thought this was good. Was his law clerk, right? I know lawyers don't like math, right? But this is really bad. Ouch. I'm sorry. First day of class. You brought it up, and I had to bring it back. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, you remember?
Of course I remember it. I don't forget things in the first day of class. Make it first impressions last. Yeah.
By way of correspondence with Professor Alfini, Nemo est Aries viventis.
I'm sorry. What'd you say?
He told this Latin saying and he said to tell Professor Blackman, and I was like, okay.
Tell me what?
Nemo est Aries viventis, I think.
I don't know. Someone Google that. I don't know.
Megan did. What does it mean?
I don't what?
The liver has no air.
Oh, no one's there until they die. Oh, okay, yes, that's true. Well, first of all, Feeney, tell him thank you very much. We'll keep Kendra and Andrew away from him just in case. He took what's called a emeritus status. You may know this, so he's basically phasing out. So he might be, I think, one of his last classes at South Texas. Yeah, I think he's moving on. Yeah, Julian, he's a good friend. I'm actually very sad because I really like him. Yeah, Julian.
So why is it that the case of the Native Americans being able to live on the property and use it but not sell it? Also, why is that not another example?
It is.
Oh, okay.
It is. I was thinking of the Oregon case, but that's also an example. I was thinking of a more recent case.
Okay.
Yeah. The bundle of six. All right, what else? All right, let's talk about the dissent. Megan, you next, or I can't remember who's next. Okay, let's talk about the dissent. What was just Kerrigan? What did the dissent say?
Well, they disagreed because they said that the degree was like the most valuable asset that they acquired during the course of their marriage, and that her earnings were an investment in that, I guess, valuable thing.
Very good. Yeah, I think the dissent is a little bit pissed off, maybe, or a little annoyed. Use whatever word you want to say. He said this is an economic reality, and it's a not unfamiliar pattern where the wife supports the husband and divorce shortly after the degree is given. And he says that equity demands extraordinary remedies to prevent extraordinary injustice. So he sees this not only just as an injustice, but one that's extraordinary. He says if the husband remained married after the MBA, it would be marital property, no problem, right? The money acquired. But because he got divorced beforehand, I think I mentioned this last week, it's a fairly common enough instance where a lawyer is about to make partner, right? And when you become a partner, you're acquiring an equity stake, an ownership stake in the law firm. For married lawyers, it's about to make partner to get divorced before the partnership is given. That way it's not considered marital property. You can imagine if a lawyer becomes partner and they lose half that, he actually loses equity in the firm. And non-lawyers can't hold equity in the firm, so they have to sell it. And it basically is a huge loss as well. So you'll see this in your lives, I'm sure. Lawyers who find it in their hearts to get divorced before their partnerships are solidified. Yeah, Rachel?
Can you put that in a prenup, like if I am to become partner in a firm? And
Not that you're asking of experience, right? You're not,
No.
I don't know. I think you probably could. I'm hesitating ever so slightly because you'd have to say that if a partnership is given, it's not deemed marital property. I think you could specify that in advance. But you might have a difficult time getting your spouse to sign that, right? You can put whatever you want in a prenup, and the spouse like, screw this, I'm out. Yeah, Ann?
I don't understand why they couldn't have just calculated the opportunity cost. It says she's paid for basically 70% of the degree she paid for. Why couldn't they have calculated opportunity costs and given her something based on that?
I think so. So this is in New Jersey as well. The New Jersey case, I can move on to this note. There's a note called Mahoney versus Mahoney. By the way, whenever you see a case where the names are the same, like Mahoney v. Mahoney, it's a divorce case. That's generally how they're styled. But in New Jersey, when there's a degree, you actually can order what they call reimbursement alimony, which is what Anne was getting at, right? Where the spouse is reimbursed for the financial contributions made during the schooling, right? And you can recover tuition, household expenses, educational costs, school travel, etc. So you can actually get some of it back. And this is exactly what the opportunity cost mentioned that Anne said. So, but I think this is a decision from the New Jersey Supreme Court. New Jersey basically made this up of whole cloth. This is something that I think a statute would probably have to require. Colorado law at the time was very strict on alimony, though.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering why, because the dissent did seem pretty strong. I was just wondering why that wasn't even considered as an option. I'm sure they must have thought of it. Anyway.
Okay. I got one for you. So this is a case that actually happened, right? You had a guy in Texas. He spent 24 years in prison. Okay? He was married. He had a DNA test performed, and it turned out he didn't commit the rapes. So he was wrongfully imprisoned for 24 years. The state gave him $2 million. So as it turns out, the wife stayed with him for part of the marriage, but then got divorced at some point because the guy was in jail. And now the ex-wife is arguing she wants a portion of that money, which he earned because he was in jail, and she loved and supported him. He argues, wait a minute, I didn't get the money till after the divorce was finalized, so it's not community property. He says, to make a claim on those years I spent in prison is, quote, freaking outrageous. Then the lawyer for the guy says, she could have been an awesome spouse or she could have been a terrible spouse, but the law hosed her, right? So there's some drama. This went through the court. Initially, the wife got nothing, right? And unfortunately, that was the end of that. So the wife got nothing. She didn't contribute towards the exoneration award. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but this was a decision from 2014 from the Fifth Court of Appeals in Dallas. Wife did not get a penny.
Did she contribute at all to his defense or his legal costs?
I think the argument was that by the time it became clear that the DNA would when the DNA evidence arose, they were already divorced. So nothing she did contribute to his exoneration. It was only the fact that the DNA evidence was tested years later. This is almost like the inheritance, right? You know, his bloodline saved him, I suppose, and therefore it's not marital property. But yeah, it's this case was walking through the courts when I was teaching this, and I didn't know the outcome. Then we have a decision, and I don't think there was anything any other appeal on it. Okay, you don't like that one. It can be fixed though. Actually, the statute, the exoneration statute, says nothing about compensating for the spouse, and it's not lost wages. So it was income acquired after divorce. It's probably best viewed as separate property. All right. Anything else in that case? All right, anything on the Graham case? Right. So the holding of the Graham case, right, is that the increased earnings from the acquisition of advanced degree is not considered marital property, and therefore can't be divided up. The New Jersey rule that Ann asked me a minute ago is the absolute minority. I don't know any other state that has that. It's basically New Jersey's on its own on this one. So generally speaking, if you wish to put your loving spouse through college, you do so at your own peril. And if you co-sign loans, you're on the hook. This is my least loving class this semester. All right. I'm going to mention briefly the idea of dower and courtesy, but I don't really want you to think about it. They've been abolished in almost every state in the union. If you write on the exam a dower and courtesy, you're wrong. That's not what I'm looking for. Every year, there's one person, must be reading from a commercial outline or something, that writes about it. I'm telling you, that's not the answer. Whatever the answer is, it's not dower courtesy. So these were common law. Everyone stops typing, so screw it, right? These were common law doctrines to ensure that surviving spouses were not left out in the cold. And the idea was that if there was a spouse who survived, she should get a certain percentage of the money. Okay? So dower, right? What is dower? The dowry, which you might have heard of, was originally a gift made by the groom to the bride at the wedding. Right? You've probably seen this like in old movies, right? Where in order to do a marriage, the groom basically makes a gift to the bride's family, basically selling off the daughter, which is more or less what it was. This soon became fixed by law. And what it was that at the time of a divorce, the wife would get roughly 1/3 of each parcel of land. Okay? This doesn't really exist anymore, so again, don't worry about it. The courtesy was the mirror image of this. It was a benefit for the husband. So you can imagine a circumstance where actually the wife had more money coming to the marriage than the husband. It happens. This was protection for the husband, that at the time of the wife's death, the husband would be sure to get something. Now, why do all these things actually matter? You may say, wait a minute, Josh. If there's a husband and wife, why wouldn't the husband leave over his wife property in his will to take care of her? Or why wouldn't the wife take care of her husband in the will? The remainder of our class for today involves situations where the spouses do not like each other. And the spouses are actively trying to screw over their spouse. You remember we did the case about a week or two ago where the woman in California died and she frantically conveyed the property herself to destroy the tenancy. Right? Remember this? This is for stuff who are not functional couples, right? These cases are for people who don't like each other. And the law creates an avenue to ensure that to ensure that the people are taken care of, right? That even if you have one spouse who's a bit of a jerk, the other spouse is not left out in the cold. Everyone with me so far? Okay, so this gives rise to what's called the modern elective share. Okay, it resembles dower and courtesy. That's all I'm going to say about it. The modern elective share is important. So first off, modern. This thing didn't exist at common law. It's a fairly recent innovation. Right? When I say recent, I mean like the last couple hundred years. But it's fairly recent. The second thing to keep in mind is that the modern elective share only exists in common law jurisdictions. The modern elective share only exists in common law jurisdictions. It does not exist in community property states. Let me say it again. The modern elective share does not exist in community property states. Everyone understand what I'm saying, right? If on the exam you tell me that Texas has a modern elective share, you are wrong. It doesn't. This is an aspect only for common law states. Okay. The modern elective share is also called forced share legislation. I kind of like that name better because it describes what's happening. It forces one spouse to give the other spouse something at death. But it's generally using the first name, but I'll, call it the first one, but the second one's actually a bit more descriptive. Okay, so where does this happen? Let's say husband and wife, married, they're in love, they love each other. The husband leaves the wife everything. Says, honey, I love you. I give you all of my worldly possessions. They're yours. Okay. That spouse doesn't need the elective share. Doesn't need it. Okay, couple number two. a very wealthy husband and a wife. The husband hates the wife and can't stand her. He says, honey, when I die, I'm going to leave you everything. No, he's not. Okay? His will leaves everything to his girlfriend. Ooh, ouch, yeah, right? But who gets the last laugh? So under the modern elective share, the spouse who survives can say, you know what? I don't want this will. Screw this will. I'm going to take my fourth share. My fourth share. And the law varies from state to state. What it generally means is that the surviving spouse can renounce the will and take 1/2 or 1/3 or some other share. It's generally a half, sometimes a third. It varies with kids. I'm actually not very concerned on what the number is. I'll tell you, what it's going to be, but it's usually you take the 4 selective shares. Just make it easier. It's usually 1/2. Just make your life easier with the math. Okay. There's a note in your book where it says a man dies after putting the ring on his wife's finger, right? And then the minister says, I pronounce you man and wife. When does the marriage become binding? The vows or at the ring? So this matters because if they were married, the spouse can then take this 4 selective share. This is designed to make sure that the surviving spouse isn't left out in the cold. Okay? Okay. All right, so questions on that. This arises in one circumstance where the surviving spouse is basically written out of the will, and they can renounce the spouse and ask for 1/2 or 1/3 of whatever marital property exists. 1/2 or 1/3 of the marital property. Okay. Yeah, Brittany?
Is that always upheld in those states?
I'm sorry?
Is it always upheld?
Yeah, the spouse always has the right to take the elective share. Right? They can choose either the will or the elective share. They can choose either one. Depends. Sometimes it might make more sense to take the will, and sometimes it makes more sense to take the elective share.
But there's no concern of this wasn't the intent of the...
That's exactly the point, though. It overrides the intent.
Okay.
By virtue of getting married, you allow a court to override your intent. That's the point, right? This guy wants to leave his money to his girlfriend. Nice try. Because now the wife can come in and request the share.
But is it only if it's something extramarital? If he wanted to leave it only to the children, she could still do the
Same.
Okay.
Let's say,
Or he gave it to his cat or whatever.
Yeah. Let's say he leaves all his money to charity and nothing to the wife. So he's like, screw this, give me 1/2. And then she can then elect to take it. Again, marriage, this comes back to the idea of the dower and courtesy, right? The idea is, even when the spouse dies, there should be something for the surviving spouse to take. They should not be able to totally screw over the surviving spouse.
Follow up.
Please.
Do they weigh in on, this is only if she's written out completely? If it's
No.
not what she likes or not
Yeah, she can
reasonable
always
for
renounce
her?
the will.
Okay.
Let's say it gives her only, say, 10%. And it's like, nah, I'd rather have 1/3. She can do that as well. Whenever the will is less advantageous to the spouse than the 1/2 or 1/3, whatever the number is, that's what you give. Hey, Kendra.
Is that only on things that are not marital property?
This only applies to 1/2 or 1/3 of the marital property. If it's not marital property, it doesn't go to the wife. Right? If there's an inheritance, for example, right? That wouldn't be chopped up in 1/2. You only chop up 1/2 the marital property.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And don't forget, usually when they're married, there might be a joint tenancy or a tenancy by the entirety. You still have survivorship rights as well. The survivorship rights are not within the elective share because that executes right upon death. So if you have property and you're married and your title is a tenancy by the entirety, upon death, it's now yours in fee simple. And then you can opt out of the will and seek your 1/2 or your 1/3. Okay. Any questions that are not about trying to evade your grandfather's trust? When did your grandfather pass away?
About 10 years ago.
Did you know about this when you were alive, this trust?
I learned of it when I turned 18.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, national treasure. Very, very secret, right? That's your hand. Is it your hand?
Yeah.
Anything else? All right, so let me summarize a bit. The major question of everything we've done today is deciding what is and what is not marital property. The laws vary, but if something is marital property, then you divide it. If it's not marital property, you don't divide it. But always keep in mind that even if the spouse who survives gets written out of the will or gets a shoddy will, they can always elect for the elective share. In community property states like Texas, you do not have the forced elective share. And in many cases, there are other provisions, but say if you move from New York to Texas and one of the spouses dies, the surviving spouse could actually get screwed very badly because there's no elective share to rely on. This is designed for a state like New York where you can have separate property, right? You can have perhaps separate, but you ensure the wife gets something. Okay? All right, I'll see you guys on Thursday. Thank you.